bright, soft, and touched by the salty air drifting in from the ocean. I woke in the small blue house I rented on Palm Street, sunlight spilling through the white curtains and making the walls glow with warmth. My heart beat fast with a mix of nerves and joy. Today was supposed to be the beginning of everything new. Today, I was going to marry Michael. As I stretched and reached for my phone on the nightstand, I found a text waiting for me. It was from him. "See you at the church at 3. I love you." Just 10 short words, but they were enough to steady me. His voice echoed in my mind, calm and sure, the way it always did when the rest of my world felt fragile. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and tried to quiet the rush of my thoughts. I imagined the aisle lined with flowers, the faces of friends, and the way Michael's steady eyes would be the only thing I would see as I walked forward. I thought about the vows, about how long I had dreamed of saying them out loud. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel at peace. That peace lasted only until I noticed the white box sitting neatly on the porch when I opened the front door. A silver bow glinted on top, reflecting the Miami sun. For a second, I thought my parents had surprised me, maybe with jewelry or something sentimental to carry down the aisle. They had flown to Orlando the night before, calling it a short Florida trip, but promising they'd be back in time. They said it was just to relax, just to step away before the big day. I believed them. Of course, I believed them. I carried the box into the kitchen and set it gently on the counter. I smiled to myself, even felt a small wave of gratitude. My parents, Helen and Robert, could be distant sometimes, but this felt thoughtful. I untied the bow, slid off the lid, and pulled away the tissue paper. Then I froze. My heart sank so fast it felt like a stone dropping into dark water. Inside the box lay my wedding dress, or at least what was left of it. The hem was blackened and brittle, the bodice charred in wide streaks, as if someone had taken fire straight to the fabric. The smell of smoke clung to the satin. My hands shook as I lifted it, a sick disbelief twisting in my stomach. On top of the ruined dress was a folded note. My mother's neat handwriting stared up at me. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. 4 words. Just 4. "You'll never be able to get married." I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling. The room tilted, the air grew thick, and my coffee mug slipped from my hand, crashing to the floor. Shards spread across the tiles, but I barely noticed. My mind roared with questions, none of them finding answers. Why would they do this? Why today of all days? Was it a cruel joke or something darker? I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I sat there staring at the ruined dress, my wedding dress, the one I had picked with such care, the one I had imagined walking toward Michael in. Now it was nothing but smoke and ash. My future turned black right in front of me. I thought about calling Michael. I thought about telling him everything, about begging him to come hold me, to remind me that we were still us. But another thought rose, just as strong. I remembered something his father, Richard Grant, once told me during a quiet moment on their terrace. "If a door burns," he said, "walk through the next one." At the time, I thought it was just a piece of business wisdom, something a billionaire tycoon said when he wanted to sound profound. Richard and his wife, Evelyn, owned shipping lines, hotels across America, and even tech firms in Europe. Their empires stretched wider than I could truly understand. But now, in my little blue house with smoke on my fingers, those words rang louder than ever. Still, I couldn't stop the pain. My parents had made their choice clear. They didn't want me to marry Michael. They didn't want me stepping into his world. They didn't want me in that family. I pressed the note against the counter, anger rising to mix with my grief. Did they think destroying my dress would destroy my will? Did they think a threat written on paper could erase the love Michael and I had built? I was their daughter, yet in that moment, I felt like a stranger to them. The minutes ticked by. I couldn't move. My phone buzzed once, twice, and then again. Friends are sending morning wishes, asking if I was ready, telling me they couldn't wait to see me in white. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. The thought of telling them what had happened felt unbearable. Finally, I stood. My legs wobbled, but I forced them to hold me. I picked up the ruined dress and shoved it back into the box, closing the lid as if shutting away a nightmare. The note I kept, though. I folded it back into its sharp edges and slipped it into my bag. Proof. Evidence of betrayal. I walked to the window and looked out at the Miami street. Life was moving on. Neighbors jogging, cars honking, children laughing as they rode bikes. The world didn't know that mine had caught fire. And yet, deep inside me, something shifted. Maybe it was fury, maybe resolve, maybe the faint echo of Richard's words. If one door burns, walk through the next one. My parents had tried to lock me out of happiness, but they had forgotten who was waiting for me on the other side. Michael, the church, still waited. The vows still waited. My future still waited. And as I looked out at the sunshine, I realized something else. Maybe today was not ruined. Maybe today had just begun. By the time I pulled up to the grand estate on Miami Beach, the burned dress sat heavy in the back seat like a shadow I couldn't shake. My little blue car looked out of place against the long row of sleek black vehicles parked near the entrance. The mansion rose before me, gleaming white stone against the turquoise water, with tall glass windows that seemed to touch the sky. The house looked less like a home and more like the headquarters of a dynasty. And, in a way, that's exactly what it was. Michael's parents, Richard and Evelyn Grant, were names you'd see in business magazines, whispered with a mix of awe and envy. They had built their fortune across shipping lines, luxury hotels stretching from New York to California, and a tech investment fund that people said could make or break an entire industry overnight. I once read a profile in a financial journal that claimed their combined empire was worth over $8 billion. Maybe the figure was inflated, but it hardly mattered. The truth was plain. They were billionaires many times over. As I stepped out of my car, my legs trembled, though not from awe of the estate. I was still raw, carrying the weight of the box, the charred silk inside, and the sharp sting of my parents' betrayal. I clutched the note in my bag, its words replaying in my mind like an echo I couldn't escape. Evelyn met me at the grand front doors, framed by pillars and wide steps that gleamed in the Miami sun. She was dressed in a cream linen suit that seemed made for her tall, graceful frame. The moment her eyes landed on the box in my arms, her expression softened. She reached for me without hesitation, and when I showed her the ruined gown, she let out a breath that sounded half like pity, half like fury on my behalf. "Oh, Claire," she whispered, pulling me into an embrace that felt more maternal than anything I'd known from my own mother in years. Her perfume was light, floral, steadying. For a moment, I let myself collapse into her arms, the box sliding against my hip. From the terrace came Richard, his voice deep and commanding even in casual speech. He walked beside Michael, who looked sharper than I'd ever seen him, even though his tie hung a little loose around his neck. His dark hair was slightly ruffled, and his eyes, oh, those eyes, fixed on me with a mix of concern and determination. "What happened?" Michael asked, striding forward. His voice carried urgency, but his hands were gentle when he reached for mine. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. Instead, I handed him the folded note. His face hardened as he read it once, then again. His jaw tightened, but his eyes never left me. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations. He simply slipped the note into his pocket and squeezed my hand. That small gesture told me more than words ever could. He was with me. Evelyn placed her hand firmly over mine. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice strong now, "we have a wardrobe room bigger than a grocery store. You'll pick a gown today. Pick 10 if you want. We'll have it fitted in an hour." She turned to the house manager, a calm, efficient woman named Grace. "Call the tailor. Now." Everything moved at once, as if Evelyn's words were the trigger for an entire operation. The mansion, which had been quiet when I arrived, sprang into life. Grace's phone calls brought a stream of seamstresses through the front doors within minutes, rolling in silver cases that clicked open to reveal fabrics more dazzling than I'd ever seen. Silks that shimmered like water. Lace as fine as cobwebs. Gowns in every shade of white and ivory, each more breathtaking than the last. The tailor, a wiry man with glasses perched on the end of his nose, moved with practiced precision. He circled me, pins between his lips, adjusting and shaping fabric as though conjuring a new life out of thin air. I stood in front of towering mirrors while Evelyn and Grace hovered nearby, offering sparkling water and little tea sandwiches as though this were simply another afternoon task. Richard, meanwhile, picked up the phone and called the church. I overheard snippets of his conversation, the calm assurance in his tone. "Push the ceremony to 5, he said. "Yes, I understand the fee. Consider it handled." When he ended the call, he didn't even blink at the cost, which I later learned was nearly $5,000 just to shift the schedule. To him, it was a breeze of wind, nothing more. Through it all, Michael stayed by my side. He didn't fuss, didn't overwhelm me with questions. He just held my hand as the tailor pinned the new gown, his gaze steady on me. "We're getting married today," he said softly but firmly, as though daring the universe to argue. "No note, no fire, no one. Not even your parents can stop us." I looked at him in the mirror. My reflection showed the dress taking shape, the pins flashing like stars against satin, but my eyes were locked on his. My heart steadied, my hands stopped trembling. I believed him. The household bustled around us like a small city in motion, everyone moving with purpose, all focused on one thing, making sure the wedding happened. Seamstresses bent and stitched. Grace brought champagne flutes on a silver tray. Evelyn adjusted my veil, her touch delicate but sure. Richard stood tall by the window, speaking to someone else on the phone, smoothing the path ahead with the quiet authority of a man used to moving mountains. For the first time since opening that cursed box on my porch, I felt the fire in my chest shift. It was no longer the sharp sting of betrayal, but a new kind of heat, strength, determination, even defiance. My parents had tried to end my future with a single cruel gesture. Instead, they had delivered me straight into the arms of a family that believed in me, protected me, and treated me as one of their own. As the tailor made his final adjustments and Evelyn clasped a diamond bracelet around my wrist, I realized something with sudden clarity. My parents' act had not broken me. It had only revealed who truly stood beside me. When the final pin slid into place, Michael squeezed my hand again. "You look perfect," he whispered. "You always do." I smiled at him, and for the first time all day, it wasn't forced. It was real. The clock ticked closer to 5. The dress was ready. The car waited outside. And my heart, though scarred, beat stronger than ever. By 4 o'clock, the whirlwind inside the Grant mansion had finally calmed. I stood in front of the long mirror in a satin gown that floated with every step, as if the fabric itself carried me forward. The gown wasn't the one I had chosen months before, the one my parents had destroyed, but in some strange way, this one felt even more mine. It was new, untouched by betrayal, sewn in urgency, yet flawless in its detail. Evelyn Grant walked over with the softest veil I had ever seen. She placed it carefully on my head, the lace falling over my shoulders like a breath of air. She smiled at me in the mirror, her reflection regal and calm. "This one is yours," she said. "No charge. Consider it a welcome gift." The words pierced through my composure. A tear slipped free before I could stop it, leaving a small crescent mark on the satin. I laughed through the tears, embarrassed, but Evelyn only smiled wider. "Even diamonds are born under pressure," she said, her hand brushing lightly over mine. The photographer, hired last minute from Evelyn's endless list of contacts, directed us to the terrace. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, the white stone underfoot, the curve of the ocean behind us, even the rows of palm trees swaying in the breeze. For a moment, it felt like stepping into a dream too grand to belong to me. They took picture after picture. In one, I stood between Evelyn and Richard, their hands resting gently on my arms. In another, Michael kissed my cheek while I held a bouquet of pale roses that looked like soft clouds in my hands. Each flash of the camera etched a memory that felt unshakable, a moment that no one, not even my parents, could undo. When the photos were ready, I chose a few and posted them to my social media. The caption was simple, with my in-laws, the Grant family. See you at the church. No hashtags, no mentions of wealth or brands. I didn't need to brag. I only wanted to share the truth as I saw it. Kindness, power used with grace, and a door that had opened for me when another had been burned. The post went live, and for a few minutes, my phone stayed quiet. Then the buzzing began. At first, just one call. Then 2. Then 5. Within half an hour, the screen lit up nonstop. My parents must have seen the photos. The call log filled with their names, Helen and Robert, over and over, mixed with numbers I didn't recognize. Unknown callers. Private numbers. All of them pressing in, demanding my attention. 700 calls, one after another, until the phone felt hot in my hand. Voicemails stacked up, their voices sharp and frantic. Call us back, my mother cried in one. You don't understand what you're doing, my father shouted in another voice. Others were stranger, softer, almost pleading. Please, don't do anything rash. We were only trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From Michael, who had held my hand while I cried. From Evelyn, who had given me a gown when mine was destroyed. From Richard, who had moved mountains with a single phone call so our ceremony could still take place. From a family that treated me with care and respect in the very moment my own had betrayed me. I didn't return the calls. I couldn't. Their words sounded hollow in my ears, excuses wrapped in panic. Every vibration of my phone only reminded me of the note they had left, the blackened dress, the message meant to crush me. No apology could erase that. We left the house just after 4:30. A sleek black car from the Grant's garage waited in the driveway, polished so brightly I could see my reflection in the doors. The driver, a tall man with kind eyes, introduced himself as Stephen. He opened the door with a practiced bow and helped me into the back seat as though I were already royalty. As we pulled away, the Miami streets blurred past in shades of green and gold. My hands trembled in my lap, but Michael's hand covered them, warm and steady. We're almost there, he whispered. His voice was the anchor I needed. Stephen glanced at us through the rearview mirror. Congratulations, he said with a smile. I grew up in New York. I've driven the Grants for years. Best family you could hope for. His voice carried the kind of certainty that only long service could give. He chuckled, adjusting the wheel as we turned onto a wide boulevard. I'm a Yankees fan, always will be. You like baseball? I shook my head, a small laugh slipping out despite the storm inside me. Not really. I like long walks and quiet rooms. Stephen's grin widened. Then you'll need both in this family. Trust me. His tone carried a hint of amusement, but there was truth in it. The Grants lived loud, their lives splashed across headlines and business pages. To survive in their orbit, I would need moments of peace carved out for myself. And I believed I could find them. As we drove closer to the church, the calls on my phone finally slowed, but the weight of them lingered. My parents were frantic, clawing at a future they could no longer control. And me? I felt strangely calm. The satin gown rested smoothly against my skin, the veil brushed against my shoulders, and Michael's hand never left mine. The car turned a final corner, and the church came into view. White walls, tall steeple, doors open wide as if waiting just for us. My breath caught. This was it. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. For a brief moment, I thought of the box on my porch, the smoke-stained fabric, the cruel note. Then I thought of Evelyn's steady smile, Richard's commanding voice, and Michael's unwavering presence. My parents had tried to break me. Instead, they had revealed the truth, that love, once chosen, cannot be burned away. The car slowed, and Stephen's voice came again, gentle this time. We're here. I opened my eyes and met Michael's gaze. His smile was small but certain, a promise written across his face. I squeezed his hand once hard and whispered, "Let's walk through this door together." And as the car came to a stop in front of the church, I felt ready, not just for the vows, not just for the ceremony, but for everything that waited beyond. The church bells rang softly at 5 o'clock, their sound floating through the open windows like music stitched into the sunlight. The white church in Miami glowed, its tall windows pouring streams of light that seemed almost liquid, falling across the pews and carpeting everything in brightness. I walked down the aisle with Julia, my maid of honor, her hand squeezing mine just once before she stepped aside. My heart beat steadily, not frantic anymore. Every step felt like a choice, like I was walking into the life I had been brave enough to defend. The pastor's words were simple, no more than what we needed. When Michael said, "I do," his voice was firm, practiced, as though every day of his life had been preparing him for this moment. When I said, "I do," the words felt like opening a gate that had been locked for years, swinging wide into something vast and bright. The applause rose softly after the kiss, a warm tide from our gathered friends. Outside, cameras flashed, but I barely noticed. The only thing that mattered was the warmth of Michael's hand in mine and the promise that we had spoken in front of God and everyone. After the ceremony, we returned to the Grant's Miami Beach estate, where the terrace looked out toward the vast Atlantic. The view stretched so far it felt as if the whole of America stood somewhere just beyond that line of blue water, watching, cheering, ready to see us step into our future. The ocean breeze carried laughter and music, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Richard raised a glass to toast us. His words were short, strong, and heavy with meaning. To family, to futures built with courage. Evelyn kissed my cheek, her eyes shining with pride, and the band struck up a soft song that drifted across the terrace. The cake was tall and plain, white on white, as elegant as everything else the Grants touched. I had one slice, then another, laughing as Michael teased me for it. For the first time, I allowed myself to savor the sweetness without guilt. Late that night, when the music faded and the guests had gone, Michael and I wandered the quiet halls of the mansion. The silence felt like ours alone. He stopped at a window overlooking the moonlit ocean and turned to me. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll look at houses. A place that's ours. A little yard, a big table, and your office by a sunny window." I smiled, my heart swelling. "I want a house in America with a green door," I said, "and I want to paint it myself." The next day, we did just that. We drove through Coral Gables, shaded by arching oaks and lined with streets that whispered of history and quiet wealth. And there, tucked away on a sunny corner, we found it, a pale yellow house with a porch swing and a lemon tree in the yard. Its shutters were slightly worn, its roof steady but unpretentious, and its windows wide enough to drink in the morning light. The price was steep, $1, $200,000, but the moment I stepped onto the porch, I felt it. This was ours. We signed the papers with steady hands. The Grants had offered, without hesitation, to wire the full amount in cash. They could have done it without blinking. But I shook my head. "Thank you," I told Richard and Evelyn, "but we'll take a mortgage. I want to feel the weight and the joy of every dollar we earn." Richard's lips curved into something between approval and pride. "Good," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Build your own story. That's the only way it lasts." And so we moved into the pale yellow house with the lemon tree. I painted the door green myself, brushstroke by brushstroke, the color bright as hope. We hung curtains, planted flowers, and set up a long wooden table in the dining room where I promised myself countless dinners, countless conversations, countless chapters of a life we would write together. Weeks later, my parents called. Their panic had dulled into something quieter, more cautious. They asked to meet, and I agreed, not for them, but for myself. I wanted to hear them say why. They sat at my new table, shifting uncomfortably in chairs that already felt broken in with Michael's and my laughter. My mother spoke first, her voice low. "We only wanted to protect you. We worried you'd be swallowed in a family so large, so powerful." My father added, "We thought burning the dress would stall things, give us time to talk. We didn't expect all this. The photos, the house, the speed of it." I listened, silent, letting their words hang in the air. Finally, I answered, "I am not small. I am Claire. I live in the United States of America. I make choices. And this was mine. My voice did not shake. I slid a plate of lemon cookies, made from the fruit of the tree in my new yard, across the table. If you want to know me, come for dinner and bring kindness. They didn't speak for a while. My mother picked up a cookie. My father took two. No one mentioned the note. But the silence itself felt like an admission, and I decided I could live with that. Now, when I sit on the porch swing with the Florida sun warming my face, I sometimes think about the burned dress. I think about the way the fabric curled into ash, about the bitter smell of smoke that clung to my kitchen that morning. I think about betrayal and fear and the kind of love that tries to control instead of trust. But mostly I think about doors. One door had been burned beyond recognition. Another had opened wide, revealing a path I hadn't expected. I had walked through it in satin, on a bright Miami day, into the arms of the man I loved and the family that stood with me. And I am still walking, past the porch swing, past the lemon tree, into a future I write in my own hand, one page, one choice, one breath at a time.